morning, everyone. Good morning. See you guys here today. Hello, gang. Harsh.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Vancouver South. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues who are here today, Minister Qualtrough, Members of Parliament Talib Noor Mohammed, Wilson Mao, Suk Dhaliwal, Randeep Sarai, Joyce Murray, but also I'd like to acknowledge the Parks Board Commissioner, Jazz Verdi. Now, in Vancouver South, I have so much, I can probably use the entire hour talking about Vancouver South, but I really want to acknowledge our community today because when back in 2014, then leader Justin Trudeau talked about having a voice in Ottawa. I want to give you a real example. What does it mean to have your community's voice in Ottawa? The community here advocated strongly for a senior centre for a very long time, for years and on years. And one of the things that the Prime Minister said is, I want to give my member of Parliament a voice, and that gives a community's voice in Ottawa. So they have advocated. And I'm proud to say, because of the work of the community from Vancouver South, that we announced a $10.2 million funding for a senior centre that's going to be going right next to this community centre here. And I also want to acknowledge Herb Dhaliwal, the former member of Parliament from here, who actually got the Sunset Senior Centre built. And this, I just want to say, would not have been possible without strong leadership. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be back in Vancouver. This place is a second home to me. I've been back a lot lately, and I'm going to keep coming back because there's lots going on here. Great to be here with our outstanding team, including Parm Bains, who came over from Richmond, and all our other MPs and Minister. Great to be here with Harj, who, yes, has been an extraordinary advocate for this community, getting things built, delivering, being a strong voice for them in Ottawa, but also stepping up as a minister on my team, now in charge of emergency preparedness, and kept very busy by everything going on across the country and around the world, but it's great to have you there. Je suis aussi très content d'être ici avec Chrystia Freeland, notre vice-première ministre et ministre des Finances. C'est très bien que tu sois ici dans l'Ouest avec moi pour commencer à annoncer des choses qu'on amène dans le budget qui s'en vient dans quelques semaines. Today, we're here to tell you about our first announcement of what will be in our budget 2024. But before I get into the details, I want to step back and talk to you about what this upcoming budget is going to be all about. In one word, fairness. Why? Because for Canada to succeed, we need everyone to succeed. When you look out at the economy these days, it just doesn't feel very fair. With inflation, with high housing costs, with so much uncertainty here and across the world, it feels like there are some people doing really, really well, but a lot of people feel stuck, or worse, like they're falling behind. And when you look at who's feeling it the most, it's hard not to think about the young people trying to get their lives started in these complex times. Les jeunes ont peut-être les moyens de se payer les frais de scolarité pour aller à l'université, mais les loyers élevés rendent leur option limitée. Après leurs études, ils font face à des pressions que leurs parents n'avaient pas. Maybe young people want to start a family, but they don't know how they can afford something bigger than a one-bedroom apartment. And with the costs of groceries, monthly bills, and all the other realities of life going up, well, that can make it hard to save for the future, hard to get ahead. Les Canadiens font face à de nombreux défis, et nous, on a des solutions à ces défis. Now, the foundation of a good life is stability. That starts with a place to call home. We know that one of the biggest issues people are facing is being able to afford a place to live, whether you're making mortgage payments or rent. This morning, I want to talk about renters. In today's Canada, more people are renting than ever before, and that number is growing at double the rate of those able to buy a new home compared to a decade ago. Nearly 2/3 of young Canadians rent their homes, and they spend a greater share of their income on housing than other generations. And in cities like Vancouver, where we are today, this is even more true. This is the most expensive city to rent in the country. Renters matter, and young Canadians put a lot of their hard-earned money towards rent. We think that should count for a lot more. So today we're announcing new protections for renters and new pathways to home ownership. As part of our upcoming budget, we're going to create a Canadian Renters' Bill of Rights. It would create a nationwide standard for lease agreements, give renters a clear history of apartment pricing so they can bargain fairly, and make sure they have more agency. We're also going to launch a new legal aid fund that will protect tenants against unfairly rising rents, rent evictions, and bad landlords. And finally, we're going to help you make your rent count towards you becoming a homeowner. We'll do that by making sure that the fact that you pay your rent every month, which, remember, is a pretty significant amount of money, that payment and that demonstrated reliability that you've shown over months and years is taken into account when you apply for a mortgage. We're going to amend the Canadian Mortgage Charter and call on landlords, banks, credit bureaus, and others to make sure that your rental history is taken into account in your credit score. This will make it easier to qualify for a mortgage or even qualify you at a lower rate. And just think about all the other things that'll come from having a better credit score. A loan to help you start a small business, for example. On va rendre l'économie plus équitable pour les locataires avec la nouvelle Charte canadienne des droits des locataires. On va aussi mettre en place un nouveau fonds de recours juridique pour les locataires. Ces deux mesures vont aider à garder les loyers équitables, à prévenir les rénovictions et à donner plus de pouvoir aux locataires dans le marché. En plus, on adopte une mesure pour que le loyer payé sur des mois et des années soit pris en compte dans la cote de crédit des locataires pour qu'ils puissent obtenir un prêt hypothécaire et peut-être même un meilleur taux d'intérêt. Ces solutions vont contribuer à protéger les locataires, dont beaucoup sont des jeunes, et à les aider à devenir propriétaires. In a world where you pay more than ever for rent, what could be a better demonstration that you're a good investment? And what is a better investment than in you, young Canadians? You make up the largest share of our working-age population. You work hard. You're creating, inventing, and developing incredible things that are building the future of Canada. You hustle. You are the heartbeat of the economy. And Canada's success in the 21st century depends on you. Now, there are renters of every age across this country, and these protections and opportunities will be there for every one of you. This is just one of the things that we're going to be doing in this upcoming budget to build an economy that is fair for every generation. Thank you. It's now my great pleasure to introduce to you the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland.
He doesn't need the step, but I do. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Thank you so much, Harj, for hosting us here. Thank you to some of our amazing BC MP colleagues. It's so wonderful to see you. And thanks above all to the young people who are here with us, and especially the young families. I heard a few parents trying to shush their children as they sort of chirped while the Prime Minister was speaking. I can think of nothing nicer to hear in the backdrop than the happy voices of young children. And I'm grateful to the children and the parents who are here. Because our message today is about you. A fair chance to build a good middle-class life, to do as well as your parents or better, has always been the promise of Canada. Today, for too many younger Canadians, that promise just isn't being fulfilled. The hurdles are too high. Young Canadians are not getting a fair chance. Many younger Canadians had a really tough introduction to their adult lives. Millennials coming of age in the early 2000s endured the chaos and the challenge and the limited opportunities caused by the Great Recession. Many in Gen Z became adults during the COVID pandemic. What a hard time to enter adulthood. Both generations have strived to pursue careers and start families at a time of high inflation, high interest rates, and really high housing costs. It is so understandable that many young Canadians feel as though the deck is stacked against them. Something doesn't add up. It used to be that if you studied hard, if you got a job, if you worked hard, your reward would be a good middle-class life. That was the equation. That was the promise of Canada. But today, younger Canadians can get a good job. They can work hard. But too often, that reward remains out of reach. There are so many wonderful young Canadians, some young families here with us today. And I know that you, like young Canadians I speak to across the country, are worried. You look at the way your parents live and you wonder, how will I ever be able to afford that? A similar sense of anxiety exists among those of us who care about you, about our younger generation, your parents, your grandparents, your older sisters and brothers. We're worried too. We feel for our younger generations who have faced unfair burdens and who face unfair obstacles. What so many parents have achieved for themselves, a degree of comfort, a degree of security, we want for our children too. We want your hard work to be rewarded, just as it was for us. We want you to face the future with a sense of optimism, a sense of anticipation, not with a sense of angst. Nous avons atteint un moment charnière pour les milléniaux et la génération Z. Ils sont remplis de talent et ont un potentiel énorme. Ils ont besoin de voir et de sentir que notre pays peut fonctionner à leur avantage, que la promesse du Canada peut encore se concrétiser. Ce que nous unit en ce moment, c'est le désir d'aider chacun à réaliser la promesse du Canada et d'avoir cette réelle chance de bâtir une vie au sein de la classe moyenne. And so to the younger Canadians here with us today, and to all of you across our amazing country, I just want to say, your concerns are real. You're not making it up. Your frustration is understandable. This isn't your fault, and it doesn't need to be your future. We have a plan to build a Canada that works better for you, where you can get ahead, where your hard work pays off, where you can buy a home, and where you can realize the incredible promise of our great country and get a fair chance at middle-class life. So, how will we do it? First, we are going to turbocharge the construction of new homes across the country. Because the best way to bring down home prices is to increase supply, and quickly. That's why we're cutting red tape and reforming zoning, so more homes get built and get built faster. We're also funding the construction of more apartments and affordable housing across the country. over the coming days and in the April budget, we are going to launch a no-holds-barred plan to wrestle down the costs of owning and renting a home. We need to make real the promise of Canada for younger Canadians, and we are going to pull every single lever and push every single button to deliver more housing without delay. Ensuite, nous réduirons le coût de la vie. Nous avons apporté des améliorations au filet de sécurité sociale du Canada pour toutes les générations afin de réduire le coût de la vie. Les garderies à 10 $ par jour font déjà économiser des milliers de dollars par année aux jeunes parents. De nouveaux programmes aident les gens à payer les rendez-vous chez le dentiste et les médicaments, y compris les contraceptifs, et viennent encore davantage alléger leur fardeau financier. Et dans le prochain budget, nous prendrons encore d'autres mesures pour rendre la vie plus abordable et pour aider les jeunes Canadiennes et Canadiens à gagner du terrain. Third, we're going to grow our economy in a way that is shared by everyone. Our country works best when our economy is growing and when more opportunities exist for every generation. To drive the kind of growth that will move the needle for Canadians, we're going to use the coming budget to build on our efforts to increase investment, to enhance productivity, and encourage the kind of game-changing innovation that will create good-paying and meaningful jobs and keep Canada and Canadians at the economic forefront. We're backing groundbreaking industries, so Canada remains on the cutting edge of the technologies of tomorrow and the good jobs they will bring. We're working to empower more of our best entrepreneurs and innovators to put their ideas to work here at home in Canada. We're investing so our communities are great places to live, work, and raise a family. And we're going to work harder and do more to open up new career opportunities for Canadians. We're acting now and acting with purpose, because the costs of inaction today would be borne chiefly by younger Canadians. We'd be leaving them behind. And we can't and we won't do that. Instead, we're going to help young Canadians realize the promise of Canada with a responsible economic plan that reduces our debt to GDP ratio and grows the economy, so we can ensure today's strong social safety net is affordable and is strong for future generations. Today, as a next step in our plan, we are here to announce robust new protections for renters and an easier pathway to home ownership for people who are renting a place right now. More Gen Z and millennials are renting today than the generations that came before them. This is especially true here in BC. Here, almost 60% of Canadians between the ages of 25 and 34 are renters. In comparison, only 24% of people between the ages of 55 and 64 are renters. And we all know that renters are facing skyrocketing rent across the country, and we know renters need support right now. That's why we're introducing a new Canadian Renters Bill of Rights and a $15 million tenant protection fund. The Renters Bill of Rights, which we will develop in partnership with provinces and territories, will protect renters from unfair practices like rent evictions. It will make leases simpler by introducing a nationwide standard lease agreement and introduce price transparency by requiring landlords to disclose the price history of apartments. And the Tenant Protection Fund will increase access to legal services for tenants and support tenants' advocacy organizations. Because when renters' rights are supported, they have a better chance of staying in their homes and their communities. Unlike many other monthly payments, renters don't get credit for what is often their biggest expense, paying their rent on time. It doesn't help your credit score yet. When it comes time to buy a home, renters deserve credit for the money they spend on rent today and that they have spent on rent over the years. So we're going to ask banks, lenders, landlords, and fintechs to work together to ensure that on-time rent payments by renters help renters to get better credit and potentially qualify for a mortgage, and maybe qualify for that mortgage at a lower interest rate. This tool, this element of fairness, is going to be especially useful for people who rent and have little credit history. Pour les locataires milléniaux et de la génération Z, nous facilitons l'accès à la propriété et, en attendant, nous facilitons la location. Grâce au compte d'épargne libre d'impôt pour l'achat d'une première propriété, nous aidons les locataires à épargner pour leur première mise de fonds et à se qualifier pour un prêt hypothécaire et à ouvrir la porte de leur première maison. And since we're here in Vancouver today, I just want to take a moment to give a shout out to Premier Eby and the BC government. The Premier and his team are doing ambitious and exciting things on housing. We love working with him and his team, including my friend, the Finance Minister, Katrina Conroy. And we look forward to continuing our work together to build more homes faster and to make housing more affordable for people across this amazing province. Our government was first elected on a vow to strengthen and expand the middle class. And we delivered on that pledge by reducing poverty, especially for children and seniors, and creating millions of good jobs for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Our work isn't over. Our renewed focus today is unlocking the door to the middle class for millions of younger Canadians. We will build more housing and help make life cost less. We will drive our economy towards growth that lifts everyone up. In all we do, we dedicate ourselves to keeping the promise of Canada within reach for our younger generations, for young Canadians, because that is what you have earned. That is what you deserve. And I have to say, it's what your parents, it's what your grandparents, it's what your older sisters and brothers want for you. You are Canada's present, you are Canada's future, and we are absolutely committed to unlocking the promise of Canada for you. Thank you very much.
Merci. Nous allons maintenant passer au période des questions. We'll now start the question and answer period. First question goes to Elijah Paulson from Global News.
Hi, like you said, Elijah Paulson from Global News. In your press release today, you say that renters feel like the deck is stacked against them. Do you bear responsibility for that feeling after being in power the last 8 years?
I think we've seen how important it is to support young people who are at the center of our economy and the center of Canada's success in the 21st century. And yet, we've seen time and time again international issues, whether it's inflation or interest rates or war or destabilized supply chains or a pandemic or climate change, knock young people about. We need to meet them where we are. Yes, we have invested massively in housing over the past years, but there is a need to do more. There is something fundamentally unfair about the fact that young people or renters pay $2,000 a month for rent, whereas someone paying $2,000 in their mortgage payments gets credit for that, gets to build their credit score, gets to access more financing from the banks. But if you pay $2,000 every month in rent, or even more in many cases, that doesn't count towards anything. That's not taken into account in evaluating you as someone who can be offered a mortgage and a pathway to home ownership. That's something that the number of renters increasing across the country, and quite frankly, the raise in rents across the country is requiring us to do. So that's why the heart of this announcement is about making sure we're focused on fairness. Fairness for renters, fairness for young people, fairness for the future. We're bringing forward a number of measures today to focus on renters, but over the next weeks, we're going to be talking about all the different things we're doing to bring in fairness for young people and for all Canadians.
Great. And just a follow-up, 2 out of the 3 measures you're announcing today require substantial buy-in from either the provinces or the banks. Do you think those measures will be enough to win back millennial and Gen Z voters who previously had overwhelmingly voted for you, but have now moved to the Conservative Party?
I got into politics focused on young people. I was a high school teacher here in BC. I got in as a youth advocate and an environmental activist, and I made working for young people the center of my campaign to become Prime Minister, and have focused on them ever since. And the reality is, young people who are key to our present and obviously key to our future are seeing a system that is stacked against them. That's true in Canada, but it's true elsewhere around the world. So what we're focused on now is making sure that young people can see their success in the economy, can see that their hard work is going to build a stable, better life for them. And we're starting today by recognizing that so many young people are renters, and being renters don't see anymore that pathway towards home ownership that was available to previous generations. One of the things we're doing to change that today is by, yes, working with banks, with lenders, with landlord associations, and with fintech innovations in the financial sector that are already moving forward on measures like this, to make sure that anyone who's paying rent anywhere across the country is able to demonstrate that reliability of paying rent every month as being worthy of the kind of investment that banks can make to get a mortgage later on. It's about changing the rules of a game in a way that meets young people where they are and responds to their hopes and dreams for the future. That's what I'm really excited about right now.
Next.
Okay. Je me suis lancé en politique en tant qu'enseignant avec une priorisation sur les jeunes. Je savais que d'amener des jeunes à s'intéresser à la politique et de les équiper pour un avenir qui est en train de se transformer, un monde qui est en train de changer, était nécessaire. On a fait énormément pour les jeunes au cours des dernières années, mais j'ai parlé à trop de jeunes ces jours-ci pour qui l'avenir n'est pas aussi prometteur que ça a été pour les générations antérieures. Et aujourd'hui, on fait une annonce pour les locataires où il y a énormément de jeunes qui payent des loyers, mais qui ne voient pas une piste vers l'achat d'une première propriété. Et un des gros défis, c'est que si quelqu'un paye une hypothèque à 2 000 $ par mois, bien, ils ont un certain crédit pour ça dans leur record, dans leur dossier, qui va ensuite permettre aux banques de leur donner plus d'argent dans l'avenir. Mais quelqu'un qui paye 2 000 $ en loyer à chaque mois n'a aucune reconnaissance de cette fiabilité du travail qu'ils font pour pouvoir payer ce loyer. Alors, on est en train de changer la donne. On va travailler avec les banques, avec les institutions financières, avec les propriétaires, pour s'assurer que quand quelqu'un paye un loyer de façon régulière, surtout que les loyers sont de plus en plus chers, ils vont être reconnus dans leur fiabilité comme étant un investissement sûr, et ils vont pouvoir accéder à des hypothèques éventuellement et peut-être même à des meilleurs taux d'intérêt pour acheter une maison.
Next question.
Merci. Thank you.
Hi there, Thomas Hill from Bloomberg News. Asking rents in Canada increased 10.5% on the previous year in February. Do these measures go far enough to address rental inflation, and have you modelled how much of an impact you expect them to have?
We know that rents have gone up across the country because of a few different factors. First of all, a shortage of housing, a shortage of apartments for rent, a shortage of units available on the market, which of course drives up prices. Which is why over the past year, including by removing the GST on purpose-built rental housing, which has led to many new apartment building projects going up, the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is changing the way municipalities zone and build density, we're investing massive amounts of not just money, but effort and partnerships in increasing supply across the country so there are more units, which will keep prices down. At the same time, we know there's challenges on the supply side as the population of temporary residents in this country has reached 6.5% of our total population, up from around 2 or 3% just 5 or 6 years ago. That's put tremendous pressure on the rental market, and that's why we're turning the dial a little bit on temporary residents, whether it's international students or temporary foreign workers, to make sure that they are a number that can be properly absorbed by our housing stocks. So we're working both on the demand side and on the supply side. But the reality is young people are spending a huge amount of their income on rent. And if you look at someone who pays a $2,000 mortgage, they're getting recognition and credit for that from the bank as part of their credit score. But if you're paying $2,000 a month on rent, that gives you no kudos. It gives you no credit. It gives you no recognition that you are working hard to meet your obligations and pay a sizable sum every month. That's why this change of making sure that the money you pay in rent every month is recognized as part of your reliability, as part of your credit score, will help you eventually unlock homeownership, access a mortgage, access borrowing, and be able to build that future that we know you deserve.
Thank you. And if I could ask a follow-up on the talks with the provinces and territories, have you started those, and how long do you expect that to take?
I have to say, being here in BC, I cannot help but emphasize that the positive conversations we've had with a number of governments, BC being forefront among them, on solving the rental and the housing crisis that people are facing right across the country. The BC Builds program, which was $2 billion put forward by BC that we matched with $2 billion from the federal government, is unlocking affordable housing across the province in an extraordinarily impactful way. We move forward with the Housing Accelerator Fund investment in Vancouver and in a number of municipalities across the Lower Mainland that is changing the way we build housing in this part of the country, and indeed right across the country. And we're going to continue to work with provinces right across the country who recognize the challenges of and the need to step up in partnership on solving this housing crisis. I don't think there's a single provincial government across the country that is saying, oh no, we need to do less on housing. No, we all need to do more. And we're going to continue to push and hold people to account. I know there's a current disagreement with the province of Ontario that we feel is not reaching the level of the commitments they'd made a number of years ago for money to flow. And we're going to work those through because we know that investing in communities, getting more density, building more homes is the way to build a better future for young people and therefore for all Canadians.
Next question.
Hi there, Ethan Sawyer, CBC News. My question is about the carbon tax. Are you open to sitting down with the premiers to discuss their concerns about the carbon tax increase?
Over the past number of years, I have sat down with every premier in the country to talk about everything that we are doing together to fight climate change and everything we need to continue to do, not just to fight climate change, but to put more money in the pockets of Canadians. Conservative premiers across this country are misleading Canadians, are not telling the truth. 8 out of 10 families across the country in federal backstop jurisdictions make more money with the Canada carbon rebate than it costs with the price on pollution. So not only are we fighting climate change and reducing emissions, but we're putting more money back in the pockets of families, particularly in low and middle income families across the country. It's basic math that the Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed time and time again. But for ideological reasons or reasons of pure partisanship, Conservative politicians across this country are not telling the truth to Canadians. And that's why I called them out. And I'm going to continue to call them out and remind them that if they really don't like our approach to pricing pollution, they can develop their own approach. Here in BC, that's what a BC more conservative government did years ago in creating Canada's first price on pollution. Quebec did the same. Now, we expect everyone to hit the same level of ambition in the fight against climate change because that's fair and that's important if we're going to actually make a difference in the extreme weather events that we're seeing across the country and around the world that are coming. So yes, people need to fight climate change, but any province that wants to put forward a similarly robust way to fight climate change, but do it in a way that works for them, is more than welcome to, and has been from the very beginning of our price on pollution. But Conservative premiers in general would rather complain and attack and mislead Canadians for narrow political gain because of both an ideological objection, apparently, to fighting climate change, but also to an unwillingness to recognize that we are putting more money in people's pockets with rebate checks that Pierre Poilievre wants to take away from Canadians. And to put an even clearer point on it, we announced a doubling of the rural top-up that hits millions of Canadians across the country, and that's being held up in the House of Commons by Pierre Poilievre and his Conservative Party that are preventing that doubling of the rural top-up, money in the pockets of Canadian living in rural communities across the country, from having that money to help with the high cost of living on every different level. That's irresponsible by Conservative premiers, and I'm going to continue to call out all Conservative politicians who are doing that.
Thanks. One follow-up. CSE confirms Canada has been targeted by the same hackers the US and UK have sanctioned for an alleged cyber espionage campaign tied to China. When was Canada targeted and what happened? Why didn't Canada impose sanctions too? And if I can get an answer in French as well.
We have seen over the past number of years increased cyber attacks from foreign actors, including state actors around the world. The CSE report was very clear on that. But it is also very clear that we are taking concrete actions to counter that, to create more resilience and robustness in our cyber defense systems across the country, and to keep Canadians and our economy safe. It is not correct, and it's not right that cyber actors continue to act with such irresponsible impunity in our economies around the world, and we're continuing to work with our Five Eyes partners and other international partners to make sure that we're both protecting ourselves and ensuring that we're protecting into the future. La réalité, c'est qu'il y a de plus en plus de cyberattaques à travers le monde qui ciblent nos démocraties, nos économies en tant que pays occidentaux. Et nous allons continuer de travailler avec nos partenaires pour s'assurer qu'on protège l'économie canadienne et la démocratie canadienne, tout en s'assurant que ça ne continue plus dans l'avenir.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour, Wildinette Paul avec Radio-Canada. Alors, je vais vous demander de répondre, s'il vous plaît, en français et en anglais. Pourquoi vous proposez des solutions qui sont de compétences provinciales et, à votre avis, à quel point cela pourrait ralentir la mise en place des mesures annoncées aujourd'hui?
La réalité, c'est que les gens font face à une crise de logement à travers le pays. Et pour s'assurer qu'on est en train de faire tout ce qui est nécessaire pour répondre aux besoins des jeunes locataires et des locataires en général, on a pris des mesures pour que, par exemple, le loyer que les gens payent à chaque mois compte dans leur cote de crédit. Comme vous savez très bien, les banques, les institutions financières sont d'une compétence fédérale et donc on travaillera avec les banques et avec les provinces dans le besoin pour s'assurer que ces changements sont faits dans la façon qu'on s'assure que le loyer compte et est reconnu quand vient la capacité de bâtir un avenir économique plus prospère pour les jeunes. The reality is, we recognize that housing is a challenge right across the country. And banking is a federal area of responsibility, so making sure that we're working with banks to recognize that the monthly rent that so many people pay is something that they actually get recognition for and credit for, so that when they go to apply for a mortgage or to buy a home, people will be able to see that they were reliable, that they were there stepping up with an increasingly large portion of their monthly income to pay a rent. These are things that solve a problem of a system that wasn't meeting the needs of young people. We're excited to be leading on this right across the country.
Merci. La prochaine question. Vous avez parlé aujourd'hui de la Colombie-Britannique. On sait à quel point c'est difficile pour de nombreux résidents en ce moment et on annonce 15 millions pour l'ensemble du pays. J'aimerais savoir qu'est-ce que ça va changer concrètement parlant en date d'aujourd'hui alors que plusieurs personnes ont du mal à se loger ces mesures annoncées.
Attendez, on a investi 4 milliards de dollars en fonds d'accélération pour la construction de logements. On est en train de changer les règles au niveau des cotes de crédit. Ça va faire une grande différence. On a investi des centaines de millions de dollars en abordabilité, en logement abordable. On a enlevé la TPS sur les constructions de nouveaux appartements, ce qui est en train de bâtir plus de blocs à appartements. On est en train de faire énormément de choses, mais aujourd'hui, effectivement, on fait une annonce importante de 15 millions de dollars pour les associations de locataires, de défense des droits des locataires, pour que des gens qui font face à des situations injustes ou qui se font mettre dehors à cause d'une rénovation ont des capacités de se défendre. C'est de l'argent qui est là pour aider et appuyer les gens qui font face à des injustices. Et ça fait partie de la donne pour rendre un petit peu plus équitable notre système pour les jeunes et pour les locataires.
Merci.
Last question.
Hi, Prime Minister Jawad Siddiqui with Omni Television. This is regarding India-Canada relations. So how is India's cooperation shaping up on the assassination investigations of Canadian citizen Hardeep Singh Nijjar when Canada has credible allegations and India expects Canada to complete its own investigation first?
The killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil is something that we all should take extremely seriously. And the credible allegations that agents of the Indian government were involved in that is something that we did not declare lightly, but our responsibility to protect all Canadians from illegal actions by foreign governments is something that, as a country grounded in diversity, we need to take very seriously. That's why we've been unequivocal about standing up for the rule of law and ensuring that the appropriate investigations are being done in full accordance with our justice system and our police independence. At the same time, we're looking to work constructively with the government of India to get to the bottom of this, to understand how this could have happened, and to make sure that no Canadians are ever vulnerable again to foreign interference by any international power.
And just switching gears back to today's announcement, when are you expecting to see the Bill of Rights in place, knowing that provinces would have to develop it? And then also, what's your estimate of how many renters in Canada may be able to make switch from renting to buying? And should they expect that this would be applied retroactively or after the legislation is passed?
Establishing the principle with banks and lending institutions that people should get credit for the rent that they pay every month is something that, quite frankly, banks and financial institutions want to do. It will allow them to get more and more customers and get a more reliable picture of who they can lend to and who's going to be able to be part of a path towards home ownership in the coming years. There are technical challenges to that. If you can imagine someone paying rent to an uncle or paying rent to an elderly landlady who lives upstairs, maybe the records keeping and the documentation isn't quite there in a way that would make this easy. So there is going to be an implementation period. But to recognize that 2/3 of young people are now renters across the country, and to not give them credit, particularly given that rent is an increasingly onerous burden and an increasingly large part of their monthly salary, would be not recognizing the hard work that young people are doing and not giving them a chance to get ahead. And that's why we're making this happen. Yes, there will be discussions. I know there are a number of financial institutions and landlords who are already doing this in various places in various cases, but we want to create a systematic approach that will cover the entire country, that will allow people to get credit for the monthly rent payments so that they can build their credit score and have an easier path towards eventually getting a mortgage, owning a home, and continuing to build a more prosperous life. Nous savons que c'est un défi de s'assurer que tout le monde qui paye un loyer va pouvoir avoir ce loyer reconnu au niveau de leur code de crédit, parce qu'il y a bien des gens qui louent de particuliers ou d'une personne qui a seulement un appartement à louer, et d'avoir la transparence et la rigueur pour pouvoir appliquer ça à leur code de crédit va prendre un peu de travail. Mais je peux vous assurer que les institutions financières, comme les banques, sont très ouverts à faire ça. Il y en a plusieurs qui font déjà à petite échelle, parce que ça crée plus d'informations sur des jeunes qui sont fiables pour pouvoir faire une hypothèque. Si tu peux payer un loyer de 2 000 $ à chaque mois, ça rassure les institutions que tu vas pouvoir payer une hypothèque de 2 000 $ à chaque mois. Donc, c'est une façon de reconnaître ce que les jeunes sont en train de faire maintenant, le travail qu'ils livrent maintenant, pour pouvoir bâtir un avenir meilleur. Et oui, ça va prendre de la coordination entre les propriétaires, les institutions bancaires, mais c'est quelque chose qui est déjà en train d'être fait à petite échelle dans certains endroits. On va pouvoir travailler pour établir ça à travers le pays. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you, everyone.